Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Lewis Speaks, and today I want to talk about the truth about my truth. For 17 years, I have been living my truth. And when I say living my truth, I mean I've been living as a gay man. And this supposed truth that I was living was really a lie. It was a lie that I've come to believe was my identity. It was a lie that I sought after because it allowed me to stand up for something. When for so many years I just stood for nothing and fell for everything. And so finally, as a gay man, I had the opportunity to stand up for something. And I think this is what made the life attractive, because for so long I thought I was living my truth. I was being honest about who I was. I was not afraid to share that with anybody. I wasn't going back in anyone's closet. When I came out, quote unquote, I took to the ground running. I refused to accept any labels that people put on me. I refused to hide who I was. And for the longest time, I thought of this as freedom. And the funny thing about this illusion of freedom is that you will think that you have this freedom to be who you are, when really this unrestricted freedom comes at a cost. And the cost is your morals, your principles, your values, and your beliefs. So much of what I thought I was fighting for was really just rebellion and misplaced anger and trauma and wounding, me acting out. I lived my life as a gay man. I remember, I'll never forget, it was March 2007. March 2007, that's when I first was thrust into the gay community, And the first night I went to a club. I went to a club called Rocks. And that's where I met my first boyfriend and also had my first sexual experience with a man. And I guess I was just going for broke that night, trying to clean up big and win big, because that same night I got both my future boyfriend and also this dude that would just be a reflection of the life thereafter in terms of casual sex and one night stands and promiscuity. It was just a reflection of what was to come, and at the time I was green. I was new to the scene. I thought it was fun. I thought it was a way to get love. I thought it was a way to find my father. I thought so many things, but once again, that truth that I was living was really the direct result of a lie. The lie being that no man loves me, so I have to seek love through these strangers, The lie being that I was born this way. When truth be told, I don't believe I was born this way. I believe, truth be told, that I was made this way. I believe that so many adverse experiences in my life, so many of my first relationships with my caretakers, namely my father, were non-existent, were abusive, were traumatic. And so these wounds went unhealed for so many years. And then finally, I enter into a community, and I'll use that term loosely. I enter into what I believed at the time was a community. And it was the answer to everything that I was looking for. It provided me with closeness, tenderness, male closeness, male tenderness, male friendship. Finally, I was the masculine one, as opposed to the boy with sugar in his tank, or the faggot, or the sissy, or whatever names these boys called me on the playground. I was now the masculine one. I presented as masculine. I was wanted by all the boys. I was envied, and it made me feel powerful, But at the same time, I was allowed to be vulnerable. I was allowed to relax in the arms of a man and let him lead. Let him take the lead. And a lot of us young men who identify as gay, oftentimes, many of us play these submissive roles because we enjoy the freedom that we get from responsibility. Many of us are over-responsible in different aspects of our lives, and being gay allows you a break from being that overly responsible, that person that's always in charge, always has to know where you're going and what to do. Finally, we can just relax and let someone else take the lead. Let someone else take the driver's seat. And it felt good for a while, but then, I think gay is fun in your 20s, but in your 30s and 40s, it becomes something else. It becomes a rude awakening. You start to see that all the men that you thought had your back really didn't. You start to see that all the friends you thought you had, you didn't really have. I guess it was a trauma bond. Many of us bond through trauma. The trauma being not having access to male love, male friendship, male camaraderie, not being understood. Because oftentimes we as gay men are cultured. We don't like certain things that other typical men like: sports, roughhousing. We don't really like those things. And so oftentimes we feel alone. We feel isolated, but then here comes other men who finally, they want us, they value us, they are invested in our lives, and it's intoxicating. It feels good, but it's an illusion. And we bond over this illusion as gay men. But then when we wake up in our 30s and 40s, we realize that this was a false bond. This was a bond that was based on what? Trauma. Wounding, unhealed wounds. And the more we heal, the more we start to realize that, wait a minute, this life is no longer effective. It's no longer helpful. But rather it becomes dangerous to our survival. At least that's been my experience. I realize that the deeper and deeper I stay and go into the life, the more at risk I put myself. The more at risk I put myself. And for us, danger is an aphrodisiac. Many of us get off on dangerous encounters and the possibility of danger, but as you get older, you start to really value your life, and you start to realize the ways in which you, I would say, betray yourself and also let yourself down. How you put yourself at risk just for the touch and the vision of another man, just to be seen and sheltered in his gaze. The things that we do just to be sheltered in a man's gaze. We put ourselves at risk. We sit up here, we have not learned the art of self-protection, because most of the times, and this is not all, I'm just going to say that right quick, this is not every gay man's experience. But many of the gay men that I've spoken to, a lot of them either have strained relationships with their dads, or non-existent relationships with their dads, or complicated relationships with their dads. And many of them have not been taught the art of self-protection. So when you have not been taught how to protect yourself, you don't. You oftentimes put yourself in very precarious situations and very risky, dangerous situations because you were never taught how to protect yourself. We let the men not wear protection. It matches the lack of protection that we never got growing up. You know, it corresponds to the lack of care, concern, protection we never got growing up. And here's the thing. When you feel like no one cares about you in this life, it becomes so easy for you to throw your own life away. Fathers, you are the first line of defense for your sons. You are the first line. You teach them how to protect and defend themselves. And when you are not there, you put your son at risk. You murder your son. Your absence is the equivalent of a knife in that boy's heart. And so that's what many of us have to contend with. You know, we oftentimes go to illusions. We turn to illusions in order to manage the reality that we are out here unprotected. You know? But we think of this as living our truth, when really this is not how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to have fathers in our lives. We're supposed to have men to show us how to be men, to show us how to respect a woman, how to navigate that dynamic between a man and a woman. You know? Growing up, I had nothing to look at for a role model except women. My mother, she would have get-togethers with her female friends and parties, and I would see the way that she interacts with men in order to get their attention. Now, how a woman interacts with a man to get his attention versus how another man interacts with a man to get his attention, totally different. You got so many young boys out here now with limp wrists and switches in their hips because they've watched their mothers, their grandmothers, their aunts, their sisters. They've watched them interact with men, and they saw how the men responded to these women. They saw that the men actually were transfixed. You know? They were transfixed by the curves of a woman. So oftentimes, men, young boys, will emulate that just to get that male attention, that male acceptance, that male approval. You know? We're not taught how to command attention in a masculine way from our male counterparts. We're not taught that. So oftentimes we as young boys have, because we're sponges. As a young man, a young boy, you're a sponge. You're absorbing, you're watching. And if you have no male role models in your life, no healthy, positive male role models that you feel comfortable with, chances are you're going to latch on to a female role model. You're going to turn her into your role model. And as a man, that could be very dangerous because oftentimes we learn how to live in our masculinity by our fathers, by the men in our lives. And a lot of times, I know me growing up, men didn't stay. They were always a guest star. They always came, stayed a little bit, and then they left. I learned early on that I could not trust a man to stay. That was the message that I got growing up. I cannot trust a man to stay. First, my father, Then a slew of other men, my uncles, they were never really invested, So it's kind of like you learn that men are just guest stars, something to fear, something never to get close to, something to want, but know you'll never have. And so these are the messages that we as young boys have been receiving. And so there's a lot of mistrust, which leads to a form of misandry in the gay community. What is misandry? It's the hatred of men. A lot of men hate men, both heterosexual men and gay men. They hate men. And when you're a gay man who hates men, how is that going to play out in your relationship dynamics? Every man that you try to love, every man that you try to hold on to, every man that you try to befriend is always met with a form of skepticism. You can't completely trust that this person will be in your life. And so you treat them very different. It's almost as though you feed them with a long-handled spoon. You never let them get but so close to you. And a lot of our boys and men, they don't let other men get close. They don't really bond and gain that male intimacy. And I think this is why a lot of men go to the gay community, because there's a form of intimacy that you get with gay sex. There's a form of intimacy that you get. And is it real? We talked earlier about me living a lie, the truth about my truth. Well, here's another truth. Sex is not connection. Sex is not intimacy. There can be a form of intimacy achieved, but it's not true intimacy. True intimacy comes when you're fully clothed and you're sitting, you're talking with somebody and you're being vulnerable with them and you're sharing some really, really hard things about who you are. True intimacy comes when you can look somebody in their eye and you can really, really see who they are and not only know them, but understand them. Understand how their background, how their childhood has influenced certain choices in their lives. Understand them. That is the deepest form of intimacy, but oftentimes it's so much easier to take off our clothes, get in the dark, and let our flesh do the work that our hearts and our minds should be doing. It's so much easier to just get in bed with somebody and have sex and let that be the intimacy that you need. In a way, sex is a form of war. And when you have sex with somebody, you trauma bond with them. It's just an instant bond. An instant, so you think. This is the rationale. This is the mindset. This is the reasoning. This is how people justify certain things in their head. As gay men, we're thinking that we're sharing a bond with this person. There's a risk, especially if you have unprotected sex. There's a trauma bond. A lot of times I call this the devotional factor, where people will try to have unprotected sex with you just so that way they can get that strong bond and bond quickly. Gay men will try to baby mama you, or stealth, which is during the act of sex, they'll remove the condom. Just so that way they can form this false bond. And once again, there goes another lie. that after sex, this person will always be with you. You'll never be forgotten. That's the myth. That's a lie, because people can sleep with you and forget you the next day. But once again, when you're agreeing to the scene, you think that, oh, I have this golden penis, so I have this golden behind, so no one's gonna ever be able to forget about me. You know, I got the magic stick. I got the magic box. Yeah. And that's how you get tricked. Really. Thinking you got a magic stick and a magic box. Yeah, okay. But it's just a lot of lies that we're fed. As gay men, we're fed this lie, you know? And the thing about it is this: God is the truth. And there's a reason why he does not want us as men to be with other men in a sexual context. There's a reason, you know? It doesn't yield anything. I realize that all we tend to do is create death in one another too. When you think about the 80s and the 90s of how HIV/AIDS was spread and how many beautiful men died because they believed the lie. They believed the lie. I always wonder about that sometimes. I always think about what other things did they have to tell us? What wisdom, what poetry, what songs, what music, what art could we have had in the world if it wasn't for the premature deaths of these beautiful men? How our trauma can cause us to circle the drain and swallow us, never to be heard from again. You know, in a way, it's so disturbing. It's disturbing. You know, I think about all the gay men who are laying in the morgue right now. How many of them will give up this false identity based on their sexuality for just one more hour on earth? We fight so hard for a truth and to live our truth, when really it's just a lie that's killing us. And it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. So I just feel as though we as gay men, as men, we need to learn how to interact with each other, how to achieve male intimacy, how to achieve true male intimacy, and really, really care about one another outside of a sexual context. You know, because I think oftentimes we eroticize and we sexualize intimacy. You know, we eroticize the need for connection, the need for tenderness. You know, we eroticize it. And therein lies our issue. So I just wanted to share this with you all, because I know so many people are out here saying, I'm living my truth. I'm living my truth. But is it really your truth? Or is it just a lie that you have yet to really unravel? You know, what lie are you continuing to live? Not gonna lie, it's a pretty lie. It's a pretty lie in the beginning. It's a beautiful lie. It makes you feel powerful. It makes you feel noble. It makes you feel courageous that you're standing up and standing in your truth. You know, but I always refer back to a beautiful scripture in Proverbs 14:12. There exists a way that seems right, but in the end it leads to death. You know? It leads to death. And so, I know it may seem right. It may feel right. But that's the thing. It will lead to death. That's it. And that's the truth. And that's a hard truth. That's a truth nobody wants to hear. Because their emotions are calling and screaming so much louder than that truth. And sometimes the truth is, lies will always scream louder than the truth. Because the lie feels so real. It feels so good. It feels like everything we've always wanted to feel. Kind of like drugs. The lie is like a drug. It makes you feel so good, so powerful. People who have smoked crystal meth, they have said that first time they got high, they felt immensely powerful. They felt unbothered, unaffected. They felt superior. But that was a lie. That was a lie, because in that moment that they smoked, they just consented to being a slave to addiction. So it's funny how something can make you feel so powerful, yet at the same time be the cause of your undoing and turn you into a slave. The high is a lie. Similar to the high that you get in this life. You get this initial high, you feel as though you're standing up for something. You're living your truth. But then you realize all along you've been a fool. And I think many are going to wake up and realize that. They're going to wake up and they're going to say, oh, wow, I've been a fool. I have been deceived. Like in the Garden of Eden, Eve was deceived by the serpent. Many of us are deceived into believing that this is our truth, when this is not our truth. So I hope this video was helpful. And I hope that you definitely have gained something from it. I'm still on my journey. I'm still trying to navigate this entire experience. And it has not been easy. It has been fraught with a lot of setbacks. But at the same time, I'm still in the ring. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. And it's not easy. But I know that I'm worth it, and I know that God knows I'm worth it. And that's why he's not going to let me go, and he's not going to let you go either. He's going to hold on to you because you are precious in his eyes. So, I hope this video was helpful. And thank you so much, y'all. Peace.